Would you like to say?
I'm not saying anything. I don't know your life.
Is there something that I don't know?
You said there was a point.
There was a point.
There was a point where,
Can you put this down and say it?
yeah, there was a time where there was a little bit too much self-medication, but, now I don't.
Let go.
Was that a long time ago?
Yeah.
This whole room is in denial.
Melyssa Ford walks off the Joe Budden podcast. In a recent episode, Ford suddenly disappears. Now, the cause of that is most likely that there was a really awkward conversation had about substance abuse that started because Mark Lamont Hill talked about someone in his family who suffered from addiction issues. After that, the conversation pivots to who on the cast has had problems with addiction. The cast mostly played coy and didn't really want to get into too much, but the only ones who were willingly giving something up was Flip and Imani, who said they were addicted to X-rated videos. Melyssa Ford looks uncomfortable and eventually says that she was never addicted to anything. Now, the rest of the cast starts to laugh. Like, Flip literally starts, laughing, like doing that type of thing.
No.
Yeah. And then Imani asked Melyssa Ford if she has ever done coke.
You never hit the slopes?
To which she says never. After that, Joe asked Melyssa Ford to put her red Solo cup down, with Melyssa Ford hinting that there was a point in her life where she might have been addicted to alcohol. Now, Joe follows up by saying the whole cast is lying, which is telling because he says it after Melyssa Ford speaks. Then, around the 40-minute mark, Melyssa Ford is no longer on the show. They start talking about, which women they slept with, if they're Eskimo brothers, and it just was like a really male conversation, and you didn't hear Melyssa Ford, so I was like, is Melyssa Ford gone? And she was. Also, this podcast was really short, around an hour and 47 minutes, which is usually a sign on the Joe Budden podcast that something went wrong, because Joe loves doing minimum 2.5 hour podcasts, sometimes 3, and even very rarely 4. Could it be that Melyssa Ford decided to walk off after an awkward conversation where she feels her boundaries were broached? Or could it be that, Joe sent her home? On top of that, she wasn't on the subsequent pod, which to me could indicate Joe telling Melyssa Ford, hey, stay home, because I think Melyssa Ford would prefer to get paid. I feel like all of the members of the show, they at the very minimum just showing up if they can. And I saw Melyssa Ford didn't really post on Instagram too much. She did drop an episode of Hot and Bothered. This episode was also filled with other tense moments, with Melyssa Ford calling out Ish for how disengaged he can be, only coming alive when it's time to shoot at her and dogpile.
Now you want to talk.
That's when he gets excited, when it's dogpile on Mel.
That's when I get excited.
Also, I want to harken back to a previous moment of a episode that occurred where I once did a video saying that I thought Melyssa Ford was drunk, and a few people behind the scenes hit me up letting me know that Melyssa Ford was irate about those statements, which to me means that this is a really deep, sensitive subject that she does not like talking about. Nonetheless, this week has been a tough one for Melyssa Ford, as well as she was called out by Joe and Flip for her unprofessional behavior in the workplace, likely regarding Imani.
Where did the facts start?
What facts?
The fact. And whatever you involved in is worse than anything that me or Ish could do.
And her controversial decision to change the title of the Malcolm Jamal Warner interview after his untimely death.
Malcolm Jamal Warner.
Whoa. I wasn't even here when the news broke. That's not fucking funny.
Plus, there was also an interesting moment in the previous episode where Melyssa Ford finally broke, saying that she was getting sick of the cast.
Face though.
I'm
Pissed
fucking
off.
sick of
She
y'all.
tight.
I'm
Yeah,
fucking
because y'all keep
sick
fucking
of
every
y'all.
time we got her, she say my perimenopause.
It is a
my
constant in my.
perimenopause.
Yes, it is. Sorry.
Mel, you are able.
Now, after Melyssa Ford leaves, the cast makes allusions to something that happened on the balcony.
I can't take this. Where I'm leaving.
I'm out.
Come on, yo.
Like, oh, there was this big argument. Mark Lamont even says that he saw World War II happening, which I don't know what was the thing that set it off. A lot of people online are theorizing that Flip, because he likes to push boundaries, was the one that made Melyssa Ford so upset she decided to leave. But I must submit that I don't know if she decided to leave or if Joe saw how emotional she got and said, yo, just go home. You can leave. Now, the crazy thing is, after Melyssa Ford leaves, the cast looks so happy, almost like a weight has been lifted from the room.
Look at y'all. Look at us. This is happy.
All right, see?
I was already holding it.
This is a common theme. Whenever Melyssa Ford isn't on the show, the podcast, the members of it look extremely happy. And it's not just Ish, Joe, and Ice, it's even Mark. Because Mark Lamont Hill has been a thorn in Melyssa Ford's side, if you ask me. Yes, he can play lip service to the way he supports women, the way he likes to stand up for Melyssa Ford, but he doesn't seem to enjoy Melyssa Ford's presence on the show. Then there's even a point where Melyssa Ford might have been texting Mark Lamont after she left, because Ish calls out Mark after, she's gone, and is like, yo, why are you on the phone? And Mark Lamont hints that he might be talking to Melyssa Ford. But this is the path of Melyssa Ford. Often she finds herself confiding in folks that don't really rock with her. That is Flip, that is Ish, and now Mark. But let me know what you think happened. Do you feel like the cast disrespected Melyssa Ford by broaching that subject? I also want to note that I believe why she may have been put in this position is that she was on the podcast not saying much. And that's a common theme of the tension that arises on the Joe Budden podcast in regards to Melyssa Ford is she never really speaks. Like, she doesn't lead conversations. Now, that could be as a result of all the times that she has tried to lead conversation and she's been dogpiled. Plus, we also have to look at what changes may be happening next, as it's August, and Joe alluded to a new cast member coming to the show in September. Now, that new cast member is supposed to be a woman, but Joe could have revealed an interesting situation where he said that he was with Ashley. I believe that Ashley that was previously on the show, and they were listening to a Morgan Wallen song. I just think that the fact that Joe is constantly around Ashley and always speaking about Ashley might give me insight into how she might actually be the next co-host and not Mona, aka Don't Call Me White Girl. The reason why maybe Don't Call Me White Girl may not be on the show is that she's doing pretty great numbers all by herself. And I don't know if she's the best fit. She's also not from New Jersey, so she's going to have to commute. Most people who work on the Joe Budden podcast live in New Jersey, and it's the only thing that they do. I don't know if Ice lives in New Jersey, but he might. The rest of the cast, they reside in the Garden State. But let me know what you think. Do you feel like Melyssa Ford was in the right? It is always like Melyssa Ford is on thin ice, man, because there's the Imani situation. Then there was the situation where she was suspended for her appearance on the Spaces, where she threw the cast under the bus for the way they treated some type of topic, and it led to Melyssa Ford and Joe literally clashing on air in front of the whole Joe Budden community.
It's like I'm not allowed to acknowledge the things that everybody else acknowledges. I see a lot of comments, a lot, that say there is a lot of dogpiling. Whenever Melyssa talks, there's constant interruption or there is a badly placed joke to kind of dismiss what she's saying or just kind of undermine the conversation and move it in another direction. And also, I felt like the other guys in the conversation, the other guys on the pod, they were actually enjoying the conversation and having the conversation. Flip was very inquisitive about it, but he kept looking over and he kept getting signaled that this is not a point of interest and wrap it up. I'm not dumb. I'm not blind. I'm not deaf. I see the onslaught and the avalanche of criticism I received.
Now, just a few short months later, the same situation occurs. It will be kind of interesting to see how Ian Schwartzman runs interference, because I think he's kind of like the Melyssa Ford whisperer. And I think Melyssa Ford is sick of being on this show, but she cannot replace this income. Where else is Melyssa Ford gonna find the income? The only place that I think she can is Hot and Bothered. And it's only going to come if she decides to talk about the juicy industry stuff. If she talks about, who was bugging out on set. If she does an episode about the many myths of Melyssa Ford, who she dated, blah, blah, blah. It could really go off, because if you look at her channel, you will see that many of the topics that gain traction is when Melyssa Ford talks about her sex life, is when Melyssa Ford talks about being a vixen. And I think the pathway is there. I also believe that Melyssa Ford's goal with Hot and Bothered was to create a woman-focused pod that one of the networks would pick up, i.e. a Black Effect, or maybe even The Volume, because Angie Martinez is on The Volume. And I think, Melyssa Ford, that was her goal with creating that podcast. She wants to be signed to a network that just gives her ads, because currently I believe the pod doesn't have any ads, and there's rumors that it's being bankrolled by someone, and they're likely making an investment so they can get the ads on the back end. All right, y'all, let me know what you think. Did you listen to this episode that I'm referring to? It was a good episode, kind of, because of the tension, and it was quite palpable, and it culminates a week of Melyssa Ford just going through it like lighter fluid. With that said, follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. Follow me on Patreon, The Stop. I had one of the craziest Twitter spaces I've ever had just recently, like last night, and it involved Jeremy Hecht, Rory, and members of the community talking about the coverage of Drake and Kendrick and how hip-hop media is heavily biased as a result of, just how much things played out. And I thought it was a spirited discussion. Everybody was arguing.
In terms of a rap battle, you don't get to decide when you throw a punch how big the punch back is going to be. Like
Exactly. So when you throw that punch and call me a, you can't get mad that I sue UMG.
The reverse, I'm talking
What are you
about.
talking about?
And he called him after you threw those allegations. You don't get to decide how far I
No.
And you don't either. So it goes against what you're saying, because you don't get to decide what the Drake doing.
Do you not think that
Drake
calling
can do whatever
somebody
he-
a is just
I
a
can be
step too
critical.
far? Like, are there just no boundaries then?
That's what I'm saying. Like what the biggest thing I hate. No, the biggest thing I hate, because y'all like to say, "Oh, this ain't hip hop that he's doing this," but y'all. It's like y'all don't understand how serious a thing is.
There was a bunch of people that joined the space. I'm talking Rob Markman. He didn't speak, but he was in the audience. Punch from TDE. Obviously, Rory, like I said before. And it was a real reckoning of the way media, especially hip-hop media, I like to call it flip-flop media sometimes, is covering the music industry. And I think you'll really enjoy it. Really, I think that was the biggest space that I might have been a part of in terms of just a discussion about the culture and all of that. All right, y'all. This is Danny from The Stop. Make sure you tap in. Peace, y'all.